What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Mo Football. And this is episode two of What's Your Football Story. And today I have the pleasure to have one of my good friends, and I guess we can call brother now, from Golds TV and others, Hector Flores from Inter Name FC, which we'll have to talk about how he got that name because it's awesome. But other than that, Hector, how are you doing, my friend?
I am great, man. I've done. You have been on my podcast many of times, man. You saved my butt when the Afcon came because, no offense to Edward, he's not the African football connoisseur as you are. So, but I appreciate everyone from Goals TV to introduce me to you, and it's built such a great friendship from all that. And one of these days, man, I gotta go fly over to St. Louis and have a pint with you and enjoy a St. Louis soccer game.
Or and the other way around. And I was at in Houston not long ago, but I went and watched a Dash game. So I guess that's how that happens on here. But and yes, Jose is one of the great connector from Goals TV. I think he's the one making the things happen in the behind closed door and in front of the screen. But to bring it back to a little bit to Hector, the man behind Intername FC. So before we jump to that great name, could you tell the people that've been, maybe living under a rock of who Hector is, and we'll go from there.
Man, I'm a lot of things, man. I don't know where to start, but I come from humble roots from here, growing up here in Sharpstown, Texas. Specifically, that's where I'm from in Houston.
Okay.
It's a very Latin based, a lot of Nigerians. I think is one of the coolest things. Was my introduction to Africa was Nigerian culture, and so
Nice.
whenever I heard anybody with a distinctive African name, I was like, oh, he's probably Nigerian. And it's not to be like
I get that sometimes, so it's okay.
so, but yeah, Houston, at least my part of Houston was very diverse. Also, a lot of Vietnamese culture as well. So growing up with that mixture, Houston's such a unique city, man. And I think it was probably the one, in my opinion, the best place to grow up in. One day I could be eating my people's food, which if everyone wants to know, I'm Salvadorian, which is pupusas. I can eat pupusas one day. Next, I'm eating pho the next day, and next, I'm grilling fajitas on Saturday. So it is so unique to it. I think Houston could be a great place for people to go visit and explore just because of how diverse the city is, and I'm proud to be part of this. And then also, I'm just a big family guy. I like to joke around. I'm the comedian in my family, so which is very fitting, especially if you listen to the podcast. I don't know. I don't know if I don't know what it is now. I just have to make a joke at some point. Like it's in me somewhere. So, yeah, I like having fun, and you know, I love football. I grew up obviously Salvadorian, so I rooted for Brazil.
Hmm.
So, and some of my best memories have always been watching the Brazilian national team with my father. I mean, we talked about El Salvador, but obviously it's not the proudest of history. We do have a goat. We have a legend. Everyone knows about. Well, I don't know about everybody, but most people know about Mahiko Gonzalez. He's dubbed as someone that Diego Maradona says was one of the best players he ever got to play with or play against. I don't think he ever played with him, but they partied together. I know for a
Right.
fact.
There you go.
um, but yeah, and obviously U.S. soccer took me a while before to become a U.S. soccer supporter. I think at one point, I think maybe Musa, you can also maybe have that same sentiment. Was I just growing up, I just never took the U.S. seriously
Mhm.
as a football club, as a football nation. And this is coming from a Salvadorian, so I mean, take that with a grain of salt. But I think more and more as I got to learn about U.S. soccer and learn about some of these players and really learn about what soccer culture here is in the U.S., which I know people don't really think that there is a culture here, but there is. In fact,
There is one.
there is a culture, and I think learning that uniqueness kind of grew me into becoming a U.S. soccer supporter, and as I am now, very bolstered about the U.S. men's national team.
Oh, nice. So it looks like we have quite a few stages. Looks like that we'll have to go to. So some of the first one that you saying El Salvador not having a football culture or so, but growing up, was there a certain player from El Salvador or that you kind of looked up to growing up that says that's my people right there.
I think as soon as I found out the player is Salvadorian, I'm like, oh, mi gente, right? My people.
Yes.
And I think obviously when any parent or any father at least that's Salvadorian, he's gonna tell the kids about Mahiko Gonzalez, Jorge Mahiko Gonzalez. Fun fact: my brother's name is Jorge Alberto, which is actually Mahiko Gonzalez's full name. Um,
Okay.
and my brother does not like soccer, but
Wow.
great picking, Dad. But yeah, no, but yeah, my dad always talked about Mahiko. I never really got to watch him play, but the interesting thing about how Mahiko is viewed at in El Salvador, and not only in El Salvador but in Cadiz in Spain, because
Okay.
he was part of Cadiz's. I actually think a lot of people revere him as a legend over there in Cadiz. As a matter of fact, like when you talk about like the best players from Cadiz, his name is thrown up there. But they had a VHS tape of Mahiko Gonzalez, so that's how I watched his highlight film. Was watching a VHS tape that my dad got. I don't know how he got it, but he got it. And so I got to watch, Mahiko Gonzalez play, and I was like, man, he's, for that time period, I was like, this is spectacular. But as far as a Salvadoran player that I grew up watching, as far as maybe why I started watching MLS a little bit more was Cienfuegos,
Okay.
Salvador player, played for the LA Galaxy, and then like I said, kind of I latched on to any Salvadoran that I can see possibly, and to the point where Arturo Alvarez was a name for sure that I was pulling a lot for. And the reason why was not only is he Salvadorian, but he grew up here in Houston as well. So,
Nice.
so you're talking about someone that very much grew up similar to me, and we're actually also not that far off age wise, by the way. But it was just cool to see someone that was captaining El Salvador, and then he played overseas at one point, and then had his opportunity to go play back in the MLS, and actually got to play with the Houston Dynamo and actually lift the U.S. Open Cup when he was here back in not the recent one, but the one before that one. But yeah, so
Okay. Yeah, and I think it's definitely important, right, to see someone that kind of from your country of origin where you can kind of look up to. And I think we can attest to a lot of us once you see someone that's from your home country of where your parents are from, you latch to them no matter what
mhm.
teams they play for, anyways. So with that said, then you kind of mentioned that you've kind of supported Brazil. So could you tell us a little bit more about that and who kind of started that um, fandom of for Brazil?
It's definitely my dad. My dad was a big soccer fan. Is still to this day. And I remember the first time I actually would say I sat down and watched the full game and actually be able to comprehend what was going on was the '98 World Cup. And my dad was pulling for Brazil. He was hoping Brazil was gonna win it again because once again my dad just loves Brazil.
Mhm.
And I remember I think me just being a little brat. I decided I was like, I don't even know who they were playing against because once I'm like it's what 98, so I'm like 7 years old. So I mean I don't know what France is at that time, but
You like
um
that?
so I was, and it was funny at this point. My dad supported Brazil so much that I thought we were Brazilian. So, so I didn't, and then I found out about El Salvador, and I was like, that's a pretty cool country, especially now that all the things that El Salvador has been doing to improve their country. But still, always been proud for that. But my dad has just always been a big fan of Brazil. We watched the final, and I remember we put $5 on it. I mean,
I'm sorry.
I think if even if Brazil would have won, I'm obviously my dad's not gonna take $5 from his kid, but
Right.
it was just a fun little story that I like to share about all the time because it was, I guess, two things. One, I got more into football, and two, I guess that's what started my gambling addiction. And so, but to me though that game, the thing I liked about it was this is where I got to watch, I guess, my generation of Brazil.
Mhm.
Ronaldinho and Ronaldo and the team as it went on from that period. Seeing guys like Adriano, Cafu, Dida, like those guys, you you
Legends.
love the way they play. It was like the best of it all. But at the same time, watching that France team, because obviously I'm being a little punk rooting for France. And that's when you get to see guys like Thierry Henry and Zinedine Zidane, and I was like, and Patrick Vieira, and I'm like, man, these guys are dogs. Like obviously I didn't know what dog meant at the time when I was a kid, but I was like,
But you knew what the
but
skills
these
were.
guys were good. And then also at that point in my age, I didn't know, as far as club football, I didn't know too much of it. I mean, I saw other games besides internationally, but I didn't know what that was. Obviously, once again, I'm 7 years old. And plus that kind of access wasn't something that was easy here in the US at the time.
Yeah.
And so I didn't really learn more about clubs till maybe a little few years later on. Me and my best friend Edward, who I normally co-host with on the podcast, like I said, me and him both Salvadoran, very similar growing up, which both our parents were putting us on Brazil. I don't know, that's a thing. I guess Salvadorians just love Brazil. I think so. He was always drawn to Ronaldinho, and
That's
I
not a bad choice.
and I was always a big fan of R9. El
Yep.
Phenomenal, the guy that uh, I didn't know much of his story. I didn't know about the torn ACL, and then having to learn how to kick, shoot with the other foot. But that just made his story even more awesome and make his legend a little bit cooler. And then so at the time, FIFA now is a thing in our lives, and that's when we found out that Ronaldinho played for Barcelona, and R9 at that time was playing for Real Madrid, and kind of that became how me and Edward went into our journeys as Barcelona fans, and me becoming a Madrista was. And obviously I know now that R9 played for Barcelona before, but I didn't know that at the time.
Not many people would talk about that part.
Yeah. So, and then obviously and then also the funniest thing was, as I was like looking at the roster of that Real Madrid team, I was like, wait a minute, Zidane, I know who that is.
Yep.
And then so next thing I'm looking at this roster, and I was like, hey man, actually there's a lot of guys on this team that I watch already. And so it became the thing where I was like, this is my team. And then I've been a Madrista ever since. It's just always kind of, obviously, once again, I didn't know that this was the biggest club in the world. I didn't know this is a team that dominates Spain and is known for Champions League. Like, once again, I'm a child. How am I supposed to know these things? But
Fair.
it became my club, and now to the point where I just love white kids. Like it's just, except for Tottenham. But
Wow, shots fired already. Well, yeah. It looks like you had like almost the perfect introduction because I'm French, yes. So '98 is one of the best and probably greatest games that I've watched ever so far, and maybe the France against Argentina is the closest to. But and I think, like you mentioned, right, those two countries then became in all of those players that you watch play then went on to play for some of the biggest club in the world. So it looks like you were the smart man from the very beginning for picking France. And then we go and win 3-0. So maybe we should thank you for some of that history because we never look back.
Yeah. Fun fact, I never got those $5, by the way.
Yeah, no. I think our dads all owe us money at some point, but I'm sure they're saying if you have food on the table, they probably say, "Here's your $5."
Yeah, I'm sure there's that. But yeah, no, I mean it goes all the way down. It's generational. I think that I think when it comes down to anything, it's your family is always going to be your main source as to what your biggest influence, right? And my dad, I would say definitely when it comes to the game, even though he is a Barca fan,
Wow.
his love for the game, it rubbed on me, even to when I started playing organizational football, like, that's when, I always had to hear what my dad had to say before the game starts. And then after the game, I had to sit down and listen to him, things that I could improve on the games. And obviously, guys, I was a defender. Don't expect me to. I didn't have a high goal scoring marks or anything like that. But yeah, no, it was always, to me, that was like one of the things that was cool, being able to have that relationship with my father because of this game. And still to this day, if there's if there's like a quiet moment between me and my dad, we could just start talking about football and we're good. But yeah, I mean, watching any World Cup with my dad was probably like some of the the best times of my life. You know, my dad waking me up at like 4 in the morning to watch the 2002 World Cup, to watch Brazil
Japan.
beat Germany. You know, 2006. I remember my dad said, "Who do you think's going to win the World Cup?" And I was like, "I don't know. I guess Italy." And they
Wow.
won.
Okay. Yeah.
Uh,
Well,
and then also a lot of cool memories in that 2006 year. You know, me and my dad, you know, hanging out in a little tiny like little bed. You know, what's those TV trays? Eating a
uh,
burrito, watching
wow. Way
watching the
back.
2006 World Cup. So like, yeah, it's a lot of great memories of me and my dad. Not only my dad, but also my uncle. My uncle's a big influence in my life. You know, he was pretty close to becoming a professional player. I know, I'm sure everybody has that uncle that said they could have gone pro, but he
No.
was he was pretty close to being pro. Unfortunately, during the Civil War in El Salvador, he had to flee the country, and you know, obviously his football dream basically ended there. But you know, he was that guy with the massive beer belly that could still play. He would play, you know, on Sunday league and still ball out and everything. But yeah, you know, God rest his soul, man. He was definitely a big influence me as well. Also, funny enough, he was also a Barca fan. So,
Wow. Look at all of you.
so I literally just shifted away from what they wanted me to do. But
Just like every rebellious kid, it sounds like.
yeah, basically.
Yes, pretty much.
Hopefully
Uh,
your kids don't.
no, I think they're. I don't think they have much choice. You know, you see Chelsea everywhere, so I don't think they kind of watch. You know, it. Who knows? They're still young. You know,
Mhm.
maybe they change that later on. So yeah. So it looks like we went from El Salvador to supporting Brazil to then supporting Real Madrid and sometime Barcelona, depending on who you hang out with. So and as you
Never doing that. Never did that.
sorry, Jose. I tried to get him to switch to Barcelona, but clearly that won't
Hey,
work.
my
So
dad couldn't even get it done. So I mean,
I don't know. Maybe it will turn into a DVD at moment.
DVD moment, possibly. Who knows? Maybe.
Yes. Yes, and I wanted to make sure. So, for anyone that's watching that maybe didn't know what VHS is, it's a CD, like, and maybe we still have some VHS somewhere, but yes, that's just taking it old school, and that just aged us for a few years, based on what we just discussed. But and so, but with that said, so kind of fast forwarded to your MLS experience. You're one of the few people that I will say probably had a close hand than just being a fan of your club team. You actually worked for that team. So could you tell us a little bit of like how that came about and what did you do for Houston?
So, fun fact: I got a degree in sports management from Texas Southern University. So I did a lot of jobs. I got to work with the Astros in their marketing team, and also I used to take care of the field for the Astros as well.
Nice.
But you know, got to work with the Rockets. But obviously, even though I do love baseball, that's probably, I would say, as far as American sports goes, that's my number one. And yes, I grew up in Texas, American football. I do watch that as well. But when it comes down to it, though, at the end of the day, I always wanted to work for the Dynamo, and I've had some good opportunities with them. I interned them. I interned with their partnership marketing team at one point. This was when I was still in college, and obviously unpaid internships was very much a thing.
Right.
And then I also was a marketing associate, you know, part-time work, but obviously at one point I needed a full-time job. The pandemic happened, and that kind of pulled me away from sports at one point. That and then also that kind of correlates with the podcast, but I'm sure we'll get there at some point. But yeah, you know, at that point I was working like at a warehouse job, and I remember applying for to be an equipment manager. I had a little bit of background as an equipment manager just because I got to work with Rice University's football team
Okay.
as an intern. So I was just like, maybe I can get a job with as an equipment manager. It was an academy equipment manager job. So I thought, you know, that's pretty low entry. I think I have a good shot to get there. And then weirdly enough, I was literally unloading a truck with a forklift, and I get a phone call from at the time his name was, I believe it was Paul, or something with a P. But anyways, he called me and said, "Hey, are you still looking to interested in becoming an equipment manager? And I was like, yeah, man, get me the F out of here. You know, like, get me out of this warehouse, you know. I'll drive my forklift right now to the training facility if you need me to.
Um,
So yeah, you know, we interviewed, you know, and I got to know the head equipment manager at the time, and yeah, I felt pretty confident throughout the whole interview phase. Didn't know what I was going to hear from, and then you know, literally, funny enough, the day before my birthday, they call me and they tell me the job's mine, and so I was like, oh,
oh,
this is a
happy birthday.
really cool birthday present. So, and then yeah, January you know, January happened. I started working for the Dynamo as an equipment manager for their academy, which honestly, the coolest job I will say undeniably. I got to work with, you know, my favorite club, my favorite MLS club, and you know, I got to work with some really cool people. I got to meet coaches from different places in the world and some even in the U.S. Got to meet some really cool academy players that, you know, and you know, and Busa can tell you, I do. I guess I'm like a parent. I feel like sometimes where I'm like bragging about these guys because, you know, shout out to David Garcia who just got his first contract with Dynamo too. Yeah, you know, like I'm really proud of where these guys are. You know, I think at least for me initially, I know things about academies, but not MLS academies. And going through working for the MLS academy, I got to learn a deep amount of respect of what all encompasses with the academy system, and I gained a lot of knowledge from it. Also, I became best friends with Hector Herrera, so take that for what you want.
Wait, we're gonna have to talk about that part later on. Yes.
um, yeah, and I remember I'll tell that story later, but yeah, so it was a cool experience. Got to meet some great kids, got to meet some great people. And yeah, unfortunately, you know, it ended after 6 months, but it's a 6 months that I have no regrets in. And you know, to everybody over there at the Dynamo Academy, I know they're grinding hard. It's not an easy job coaching academy. You don't get the best of everything, and so you kind of have to make do what you got, which I have like nothing but respect for everybody that works there in the academy. I think shout out to Tony Vigil, who is the academy director now for the team. I think he has the right idea for this club, and like I told him when I was working for him, I'll go to war for him at any single time.
Nice. And it looks like you're still keeping it high regards till this day. So like when we're talking off record, you were about to give me like a great story about, you know, you as the kit man in one of those situations, because we all know that everybody sees just the players on the field. You see the coaches on the field. You see, you know, the medical staff, but there's a whole back room of people that make sure that, you know, the players are comfortable, the players have everything they need, and one of them is the kit folks, right? And I know it's not just one person; it's a whole group. So, could you give us a little bit of, you know, behind the scene in one of the fond memory that you have of working as a kit man or woman, I guess, for
I think I one well, I mean, at least with that story, that was one of those times where I mean, more often than not during games, I didn't really have to bring much equipment with me. Like I would have like a, you know, obviously like a blood kit in case, you know, someone gets like a bloody nose and they need to change kits real quick with an emergency kit. But you know, one of the weirdest things that happened, which it was in Generation Adidas Cup in Bradenton, Florida. If anybody gets a chance to go experience Generation Adidas Cup, I say go for it. It's a fun experience. It's really cool what they have there in IMG. But
I got to go there.
one
That's one of my plans.
one of the most bizarre things I have ever witnessed was a kid, his cleat just completely like just ripped, blew up, and it was a fairly new cleat. It was I had a lot of complaints with Adidas that year with their cleats because they just seem to have not been as well as they advertised.
Yeah.
Obviously, I didn't have a pair of cleats to swap over for him. Luckily, his parent did have an extra pair of cleats for him to switch into real quick. But from that moment on, I always carried a whole luggage full of cleats just in case anything happens. But that was one of those like lessons from that because I was like, what are the chances that someone's gonna explode a cleat? And I remember the academy director looked at me, he's like, "Can you fix it?" I was like,
Did you see that?
I was like, "No, it's dead." I mean, I was like, I don't know, time of death. I don't know what to do here. But it's a lot of trial and errors in the equipment manager. I think any kid man could tell you, like, you can plan things as hard as you can, but things are always going to happen. And some of the best kidmen that I've got to meet have been always been able to make something out of nothing.
Right.
Um, and I think, and also like the community of kidmen in general, always super supportive. If they can help you in any way, they'll do it. You know, one of the beauties of like Adidas is that there's so many templates, especially with the goalkeeper kits. So if someone is needs a goalkeeper kit, more often than not, we have a blank one. One of us has a blank one, and you know we try to do our best to help each other out. So I think that was a lot of things that I liked, but you know it was also the other opportunities that I got to get besides the academy, but also helping out with the second team. You know, and then eventually, you know, getting my shot to work with the first team was also really cool.
Nice, nice. Now I understand why. Since I've seen, I've know a few kid men and women as well that kind of working. You see that play for bigger teams than first team. You see some of those big like aluminum cases, and it's where you see they have every single player has one for hard turf, soft turf, and then they have one extra just for something that might happen.
Hmm.
And so I think it's one of those cool things when you see behind the scene is like those players and the people they have like a staff of 10, 20 people behind that has to make sure that everything is in line because one small thing can derail everything. And I think there was probably one of the women's in England. I think there was a team that forgot their socks. So I think they had another team actually borrowed theirs, and the whole entire team had a different set of socks. So and they matched the opposite team. Totally forgot who that was, but it's one of those funny stories that we don't hear much about unless we have close connections because all you see is the lights, camera, action, and
So
yeah.
I do have a story with that
Oh, there you go.
in Generation Adidas Cup. Um, and I think this is where I developed a rivalry with Minnesota United's academy. This is at least the start of the rivalry with them.
Uh-oh.
At least my personal rivalry.
Okay.
Not anybody else's involvement. Just me beefing with like 15-year-olds. but
Hey.
uh, but I think it was one of those. So you know, before any match, they lay out like what's going to be the color, you know, what kid colors are we going to be wearing. And at that time, the Dynamo had a black kid and an orange kid, and obviously the goalkeepers had a gray kid and the blue kid. At least for the Dynamo,
Okay.
their setup was. And I remember they told me, "Hey, Minnesota's going to be wearing their blue kids," and or I forgot which kid it was. I think it was their gray kid actually. No, it was their blue kid. No, they weren't wear their gray. And I was, you know, and they told us to have our goalkeeper wear gray. And oh no, it was a blue. And I remember looking at that Minnesota's blue kid. I was like, that looks a little bit more grayish than blue. And it was funny because we were all talking about it, but our admin was very adamant that it's fine. They already agreed with it, and you know, unfortunately, no one told the players that, hey, just in case, bring your other set of kits just with you, just in case. And that obviously didn't happen. And the blood kit that I did have for the goalkeeper, it was like a size extra small because I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus, but the head equipment manager before the Dynamo, he took a lot from the academy to the point where it was like I had just bare bones of inventory.
Right.
And so like the biggest kit size for a goalkeeper that I had was extra small. So
No.
and
Hopefully, it was not a big guy.
this was a U15 goalkeeper, so
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
if it was U13, it'd be a whole different story. But it
It was
wasn't the
tight.
case. It was tight, and so. But then they argued that the blue kid was not going to work either because it was also blue. It was just this weird scenario where the blue also it was also blue, but it was also gray. It was so confusing to the point where I said, "F it, these kids are wearing black. Here, put on this orange jersey. With an orange jersey with blue shorts and blue socks, and a
Wow,
blue
stylish.
and and it was funny because I was like, "This looks terrible," but you know what? He's playing. I'm sure no one's gonna say anything. he has like one of the best games ever. I think he stopped like 2 penalties. I think he got like, it was a man of the match performance for this kid, and it was all over the Dynamo Academy social media. And as soon as I get back to the hotel room, I get a message from the head equipment manager. He's like, "Why is this goalkeeper wearing an orange kit with blue shorts?"
You tell me.
And yeah, so apparently got trickled down to him asking like, "Hey, what is going on with the equipment manager for over there?" And so I told him what happened. And he's like, "All right, cool, you figured something out." So that's the good thing. So
Of all the time, he has to have the best game, and then everybody know about it, and that's when, yeah, I think one of those fun stories.
shout out to Nico Macazay, by the way.
Hey,
Kids,
so that's why kid man and woman and all of the people are that important. And so I think you mentioned that you also befriended one of the, you know, the captain and one of the best players of Dynamo. So could you tell us a little bit more of how that happened? Because not everyone can say, hey, I've had one of the probably one of the best mixed and scouted player of all time as a best friend.
So yeah, Hector Herrera that's who he's
Yes.
referring to. AKA Ache Ache, AKA the guy has a lot of nicknames.
Hey.
But the first time obviously I knew Hector Herrera was with the club, and he was a big. I know it was a big deal for a fact because all my friends that were Mexican national team fans were like, "Hey, can you try to get me this from him?" Or, "Hey, can you get him to sign this for me?" And I'm like, "No."
Nope.
And so I was in the locker room in the first team locker room, and he just I don't know where I think he came out from like the little kitchen area, and he's like, "Hey, are you new?" And I was like, "Yeah, yeah, I'm the new equipment manager for the academy." He's like, "Oh, okay, what's your name?" And I'm like, "I'm Hector." He's like, "My name's Hector," and I was like,
I know.
"We know." and so the whole time he was just fascinated with the fact that me and him both shared the same name, and in Spanish the word is tocayo. And that's kind of namesake is like the
Right.
translation for it. So, and me being clearly shorter than him, he added an ito at the end, which is tocayito, which means little namesake. And so I knew he was in the room wherever we were in the building, because as soon as I walk in, I hear Tocayito,
Yeah.
and it
That
was
that
it was
was
Ache Ache. So and then also his son plays for now I believe he plays for the U15 team, but he was at the U13 level at the time when I was working there. So he was always at the practices watching his kid train, and he would see me in my cart, and so he would walk over and we'll start just talking, and he'll tell me things about his viewpoints and how much he loves Houston and all like whenever we'll talk whatever. Um, and then there was one thing that he pointed out was just like, "Hey man, so I've seen you come in at 7 in the morning, and like it's about to be like 9. Like, when do
what
you
are you
go
doing?
home?" And I was just like, "As soon as everybody goes home." And he's just like, "Okay." And then I remember one day I was in the first team side. It was like breakfast time for the first team players. And he was like, "Hey, Tokito, come over here." And so I go over. He's like, "Do you know this guy? Like, he comes in at 7 and leaves at like 9 p.m." So like,
Oh,
and he was just like telling all the players like that, like, "Dude, this guy lives here." Like he was telling me, he's like, because I was telling him I was like saving up to want to buy a house at one point. He's like, "Why? Just you know, put a bed in your equipment room and then just live here. There's a
ouch.
there's a kitchen right there. There's a shower. There's a gym. Like, what else do you need?" And I was like, you know what? He's not wrong.
No. Yeah, and it kind of shows you, right, the mentality of a lot of the players that they only need so little, or if they're come from some so little that you might see them all the glintz, the nice cars, big houses, but if everything was taken away, just like you mentioned to you, right? Oh, all you need is a bed because you have the kitchen here and there. So quite impressive to know that someone that's so legendary can talk to everybody just like regular people, and then mention things, small things that if you just think about it is that they live even better than some people because you would have never guessed that a Mexican superstar would say, "Hey, you can just sleep right there. You have a sink, a bed, and a shower."
It's the bare essentials, right?
Yes, and it looks like he doesn't need much. So yeah, so from there, so your experience, you've pretty much have that one experience that a lot of people wish they had, because you've seen the youth of the Houston Dynamo players. Maybe you have the fighter figures, which always help because it's nice to see people going up and down. And you moved all the way to the legend of Mexico and Houston. So how did that prepare you for what now we know as insert name it FC? It's like, how was that transition? Because that's a big jump from being in the inside, but now being on the outside, trying to talk about your team.
So I had the podcast already while I was with the Dynamo.
Okay.
So insert name FC, it actually started like in the pandemic, so 2020. I think the whole trend, even I think our goals, like all this it transpired from the pandemic, all the inspirations for it. The idea of a podcast actually came from some classmates from mine in college. Obviously, once again, COVID's happening, everyone can't really do much, and so they had the idea of doing like a sports podcast.
Right.
They'll talk about broad sports and everything, and so I was like, yeah, sure, like let me know when you guys are doing it, and I'll figure it out. I literally was like, I didn't really want to do anything. I just wanted to record and then let someone else do the rest. Which is funny now because
You
I
do it all.
record, I edit, so it's just like one of the funniest things now. But I've always listened to podcasts. One of my biggest influences when it comes to podcasts is actually from Barstool Sports. His name is Big Cat. I always liked his podcast, Part of My Take. It's kind of I think very similar to their approach to like obviously American sports is how I am when it comes to soccer, which is we kind of make fun of the people that take it a little too seriously sometimes. But at the end of the day, you can clearly hear me and Edward when we talk about the game that we clearly are we're literally fans of it, and we enjoy the game just as much. It's just at the end of the day, we're like, we don't take ourselves seriously, and we expect you guys not to take us seriously either. It's all about just having fun and feeling like you're part of the conversation. But so yeah, I had no idea that even a podcast was going to be brought into my head, but I started doing some research trying to figure out like what exactly I needed for a podcast.
Mm.
And next thing you know, bought myself some equipment and I was like, all right, I'm gonna start a podcast. I recruited my best friend Edward. I've known Edward since I was 4 years old. And I was like, if I'm gonna do this, I gotta do it with you, man. And the reason why is because once again, I've known this guy since I was 4 years old. I'm 33 now. And so that's the best like our conversations that we have on the podcast are literally conversations we have like off screen,
Yeah.
so it made sense to recruit him. So he told me he was down. So that was how we created the duo. I also recruited another friend of mine that created like the beats and all that for the podcast.
Right.
And so that became our dynamic, Spencer, which Spencer was not a fan. Well, he didn't know much about football initially. And I remember we actually had an episode where we tried to like recommend him some teams. He didn't pick any of our teams. He actually became an Atletico Madrid fan, which works great for the podcast.
Yeah, there you go.
It works great for us because obviously now you have a Barca fan, a Real Madrid fan, an Atletico Madrid fan on set. So not on set, but yeah. So that's how it kind of
on set.
But yeah, so that's kind of how the podcast started initially. We were still trying to figure out a name for the show, and I remember Charlotte FC just got announced when I was like trying to figure out a name, and I was like, oh look, Charlotte FC, another insert name FC, and then that's when I was like, as soon as I said that out loud, I texted it to Edward and Spencer. Well, actually, no, I texted Edward because this was before I recruited Spencer. So I texted Edward. I was like, insert name FC, and he's just like, bro, that's gonna be so funny.
Hey,
So
you're a funny guy, and I think it's genius. That's awesome.
So yeah,
especially there's three of you, right? And you each support a different team. So I think it works perfectly.
I think it's funny that everyone gives us like a deeper meaning of the name of the podcast because they're like, oh yeah, because you guys talk about all the all the leagues in as far as like Europe and MLS and Liga MX, and maybe sometimes talk about Libertadores when we kind of know something's happening. So like you guys are so broad. That's why you call yourselves Insert Name FC, right? And I'm like, no, I was just making fun of the MLS that day. Like it's literally the motivation for it, which works out because me being an MLS fan, Edward does not like the MLS and
Okay.
doesn't care for the MLS, but it kind of works out in some aspect for it. But yeah, that name once it clicked, and then we got somebody to create a logo, and then we recorded our first episode. It sounded terrible, but
They
you know,
all do.
but as we got better and better and more comfortable with it, we've had pretty good episodes. And the best part of this podcast has just been all the great people that I've gotten to meet. I never thought I ever interview the Cooligans. I never thought tactical manager would be someone that would I could reach out to. Shoot, Heath Pierce. I never thought I would ever interview a guy like that.
Nice.
And then obviously meeting Jose and learning about his vision with Goals TV, all those things, man. Like, and all the relationships that are not built now because of Goals, like you and even the guys over at Wake Up MLS. Like it's been awesome. And yeah, it's interesting where this podcast has come from. But while I was with the Dynamo, some people knew about the podcast. I don't know why I tried to be secretive with it. I think it was because I was afraid that maybe the podcast could get me fired, which clearly there was no point of that. I got fired regardless. But um, but after I got fired, I was like, you know what? Let me just go full send now. I don't care, like, because there's I'll go full send now, and I'm gonna be more pushing with the podcast because I don't know. I think there was a weird moment where I thought, oh, I can make this my career, and maybe Insert Name FC is probably just on the wayside now. But I'm kind of glad that actually happened. Because I'm actually kind of appreciative that I got fired now because the podcast has been really fun, and I really don't want to let it go.
Yeah, and just to circle back, so yes, we do have to take you serious a lot of times because you do know football, you do know your soccer. So yes, I think you don't give yourself enough credits on that part.
I think it's like that scene from Old School when Will Ferrell's about to go into that debate, and like he takes a sip of water and then he just spills out like all these facts about economics. I think that's what happens with me and Edward, where we just start talking about like, yeah, I know that I know things, and I try to be comedic about it so that way I don't sound as pretentious. So yeah, but I get what you mean.
So now I know if you see Hector is drinking a little bit of water, you know he's about to spit facts. I think that's why that's all you're telling me from now. So yeah, but yes, and I think that's one of the great things. That's why I started. I watched your episodes, and then Ghost TV came about, and then I guess Afcon came about. So it's definitely great for that community. And you mentioned the tech and all that. So I think that's one of the other side of things where even the guys and ladies with huge platforms are still reachable to the people that kind of try to come into. So that's why I kind of started to do this, talk football, with just to learn a little bit more about the people that I interact with all the time, and kind of share what the other team's supporters looks like. So with that say on that part, so we've gone to the 4-year-old Hector to all the way to the grown man of Insert Name FC. So on this part here, we're going to start a fun part of the episode here where I'm going to ask you questions. Maybe about 2 of them, but then the rest you have no clue about, right?
At least that's what I was told.
Uh, all right. So yeah. So in this time, we're going to have some great tournaments in the continent of America. Well, I will say, right? So the first one is the Club World Cup. So who is your favorite? Just soccer expert favorite, and then who has your heart to win it all?
This Club World Cup is a lot. It's interesting because I keep flipping from one team to another because there's almost like everyone has like a yeah but kind of feel for it, especially. I mean, it's gonna be a European club. I don't see it being anybody else. I don't see it anywhere else. I think as far as MLS sides, like I would love to say that there's gonna be an MLS team in the knockout round, but I just don't see it happening. I think they're just in some tougher groups. Most of them are, at least. But I don't know. I've been and obviously I don't know if you guys watched the goals. If anybody's seen the goals TV one yet, but
Gotcha.
with
Go
me and
watch it if you haven't.
with me, Davi and Jose, but I kind of got cucked out of the team that I wanted to pick. um,
Yeah.
sorry for language.
So you know what? So what we're going to do is, since you've mentioned it, and I don't want to kill the suspense for the Gold TV and what you guys have, so let's go ahead and just remove the expert on that. And what is your heart say that is going to win it? We're going to save the expert opinion for the Goals TV. That I'll put the link below on the description for you guys to check it out.
All right. My heart says Real Madrid.
Okay.
I think Xabi Alonso is coming in. You know, if it wasn't Xabi Alonso, in Ancelotti, I'd probably be a little bit more hesitant just because of, I don't know how aggressive Real Madrid was going to be with Ancelotti in charge, but with Xabi Alonso, they have been very aggressive in the transfer market. I think a lot of the guys that are being brought in are expected to be playing in the Club World Cup. But I think I'm so confident with Xabi Alonso because of what he was able to do with Bayer Leverkusen when he took over. Because I mean, Bayer Leverkusen was in a really bad position when he took charge of the club, and look where they are now. And so I think he's the right guy for Madrid. And dumb thing to base this off of, but the fact that they're going after more Spanish players for Real Madrid, a team that at one point was like maybe one Spanish guy was on the starting lineup.
Galactico.
So I think that they're bringing back a lot of what do you expect from a Spanish club, is bringing back Spanish influence. So I think that that's what I'm liking from this team. I think that they have something to prove. Obviously, pride is a little bit also into the mix of it because of the fact that they didn't win a single trophy, this time around.
Ouch.
So I think that there's some extra motivation to do it. And I mean, it's Fiorentino Perez. The guy wants some silverware, and why not be the first team to win the Club World Cup, right? So
yeah, and he wants that money. I don't if they don't do well, I wouldn't be surprised. He was like, you know what, all of you're fired.
Basically, this is TST.
Yes, it would just 100 times more.
If it wasn't for the money, we were about to see a bunch of academy players.
I think so, and I think that's why they made the purse so big, because it means if you want it, you better come. Because what did they say? They say that most of the teams that if they win it or go too high in the stages, it will pretty much take their budget for the entire year. And some of the ones that are the FFP risk, it will clear their debt.
Oh, so Man City's got a lot of motivation.
Yeah, so yes, Chelsea, PSG, all of these, they literally they got to win it, and then they're
gonna get out of jail free card.
Yes, so. Pretty much. And that's why some people are like, maybe that was the whole plan altogether. It's like, let's find a way to not get those huge clubs in big trouble. So $1 billion goes a long way.
Yeah, no, I agree to that part. But yeah, my heart says Real Madrid.
Okay.
I've been switching a lot. But with who I think is actually going to win it. But I think that it's hard to predict this kind of competition just because we never had anything like this before.
I won't take it personally, but I think PSG is very high up to take it.
That's another team that I've been, flirting around with. And
unless
look, I'm not. This isn't me trying to glaze you or anything, but Chelsea is another team that I've been kind of thinking of. Cole Palmer is officially the 10 now for Chelsea, and I think the switch has been flipped with Chelsea. I really think so. I think they're actually things are working out in the way they should be working out, especially with all the money they spent. But
there's more going.
Yeah, so I think Chelsea's figuring things out. Cole Palmer, he's fun to watch. I know he doesn't get talked up as much maybe because I don't really follow the Premier League
Yeah,
as
he
much as
he
I should.
does. He's just not as flashy as the others, I
Hmm.
think.
I think that's what it is. Yeah.
Yes. All right. So I guess those will be some very quick question on here. So, World Cup is coming up. I know you have a few teams that you support. Um, U.S., Brazil. Where how you think how far they will each go?
Oh, I thought you were gonna say El Salvador, but
Oh, are they qualified? Oh, sorry. Are they?
no. They're still in qualifiers actually, but
Yes.
I know. Me and Edward, we talked about it. Like if El Salvador, even though this is like the extended World Cup, me and him are gonna be bubbling like we're gonna be crying like babies. Like we're
Hey, yeah.
because the last time El Salvador was in the World Cup, it was like in the '60s or something like
Ooh.
'60s. I forgot. I don't know. I just remember that score line against Hungary, which was like the biggest goal. The biggest lead in a World Cup game
Mhm.
was that one. I think it was like a 10-1 game. So
Yeah.
yeah, I would love for not to be the only thing I can to look at when it comes to when I Google El Salvador in the World Cup. So,
Hey.
um, but no, I think US is so interesting right now. I think that it just it's a weird time to be a US soccer fan. I think one, I don't believe this is the golden generation. I've made that very
Ooh.
firm. I think this is the start of something. I think
Mhm.
this is like the way I've said it plenty of times is this is the first time we have a generation of players that went through some sort of system.
Mhm.
Not the guys that played in college, like like your Alexi Lawlesses and you know.
The one that says a lot. Yeah.
So it's a different generation of player. These guys actually went through some sort of academy system and however you want to take that for a grain of salt, but still, nonetheless, you're having guys that went through the proper channels, if you will. Once again, I don't
Mhm.
really like saying those words, but all right. So this is the start, and I think the 2026 World Cup. I don't expect U.S. to win it, but I think that this was going to be the time that for those young eyes to watch this team perform and hopefully do well. My viewpoint of doing well is making it past the first knockout round.
Mm.
Um, and I think that that's going to inspire the golden generation of U.S. soccer because as someone that's watched the academy system, it has gotten better and better each time. I mean, I don't know how many times I've seen a 13. There's actually a 13-year-old right now for maybe he's 14 now actually, but for the Houston Dynamo Academy, little dude, like I thought he was a toddler at one point. And but he's good with the ball. He played up two age groups
Yes.
with
So
with a
it's good.
Dynamo. Yeah, so you don't jump a kid up that's that little up two age groups if you don't think that he can play. And
Yes.
so and I think I believe he just got his first call up with the US Youth National Team. So I think
Hey.
that you're gonna see more and more kids like that, like the whole Caven Sullivan hype. Like I'm gonna tell you right now, I expect to hear more Caven Sullivan type stories. I think the thing that a lot of criticism with the US as to the European aspect of it all. I think it's just that what Christian Pulisic did, which for us Americans, it's impressive, right? Guy that is playing at 17, 17 years old for the national team, being featured for a club like Borussia Dortmund, a Jurgen Klopp led Borussia Dortmund, or I think that was with Tuchel. But either way, but he's still being featured with a club like Borussia Dortmund. We find that impressive. We think that's amazing. But when you really think about it from a European aspect, that's that's kind
No,
of what you're
almost.
that's kind of what you're supposed to do. I'm not saying that a 17-year-old is going to start right away. I mean, once in a life kind of players are like Lamine Yamal, who's impactful players
Yeah.
at a young age. But I think guys that would get called up with the first team, be featured on the first team, that's nothing outside of the norm. And I think that there's levels to it. And I think as things progress for U.S. soccer, I think hopefully as long as they keep that track going, and that's a big emphasis on that part.
Mhm.
But it's going to take this generation of players to inspire that group of players.
Yeah, and definitely from what I've seen, the ins and out of youth soccer and all that, you definitely see the progression of the kids going up. And I think St. Louis, we have some of those 3 or 4 or 5 that always get called up. So yes, the generation is there. And I think I'm with you as well, where I think this could be the bigger Kickstarter because they're watching the World Cup now at home. And that experience that I had in 98, that's what sparked even me being even a bigger soccer player, even though I grew up in France. It's that spark um, will help. It's just hopefully US soccer make sure they take full advantage of it because there's not any time in the world where you will have every single country that qualified in your home. So hopefully they do their job properly. So what? So who's your favorite team to make it to win it all?
This time around, man, I've enjoyed Spain a lot. You know, watching them
Sounds like
once again as an outsider. Obviously, I'm not gonna sit here and tell you guys I'm gonna be decked out in Spanish gear or anything like that. Um, but I do say that this Spanish team is really good, but they are competing. It's like them and France at this point is becoming this rivalry, right? And it's funny because a few years ago with the podcast, I actually was saying that like I feel like Portugal is gonna be what we felt how France was in 2018. Was that
yeah,
this young generation of Portuguese players, Rafael Leao and the other guys in
Nuno
Portugal, which
Mendes. Yeah,
I mean they did very well, right? They won the Nations League. Ronaldo wins a third trophy for Portugal. That's also Portugal's third trophy overall, but
yeah,
nonetheless, like uh, I thought that this young group of Portuguese players, maybe that's the spark for their generation, and maybe they could win the World Cup one day. I don't know about if I feel the same way now, but yeah, it's Spain and France. I think that that's really the two teams that you got to look at, because as far, especially that not only is France like a young team in some viewpoint, they're a very experienced team, and
yeah.
so it's a very scary thought. But that you can also flip that on the same thing with Spain now, is that they're young and experienced now too, and so it's going to be really interesting to see who is the guy that can prevail, especially because U.S. is going to be different. You're gonna go to New York and have like maybe 80-degree weather, and then you have to play in Texas and deal with 120-degree weather. So
Welcome to
it
Texas.
so it's gonna be very interesting of how that all works out to the end till we get to the final. But because things can change, things can
Yes.
really much change, and it's gonna be really exciting, especially when we're going into this year, this next year, preparing for that 2026 World Cup.
Awesome, awesome. So yes, so I think those are some pretty good shouts. So yes, so us, Hector, definitely appreciate your time. I think this was great. We talk quite a lot, so we almost know everything about each other. But for those that happen to not know who Hector is, so could you tell us, plug your podcast, what you do next, what plan do you have in the upcoming months?
Yeah, man, insert name FC. So we are, I guess, essentially taking a break for the off season. We are gonna have an episode on Thursday. That's just gonna strictly be a preview for the Club World Cup and the Gold Cup, because that's also
Mhm.
happening this summer.
Yep.
So we're doing a preview for that. But then that it's just a straight break till the finals of those matches. But if you guys want to see he cover the Gold Cup and the Club World Cup, uh, I'm also with a podcast network called Belly Up Sports. They're going to be doing a super show for the Club World Cup and for the Gold Cup. So if you guys want to see me when I'm talking about each round, that's where you can find me over there on Belly Up's YouTube channel. It's just Belly Up Sports. But yeah, insert name FC. Once we're back in seasons, new episodes every Thursdays.
Awesome, awesome. And you can always see him all on Gold's TV with Wake Up MLS and the many more shows that will be coming up next. So Hector, appreciate your time, my friend. Always good talking to you. And for those of you that have not subscribed to Insert Name FC or Mo Football, so make sure you do it now because you should be ashamed of yourself. But it's a whole nother discussion. But other than that, I look forward to you all. And Hector, have a blessed day. And we'll hopefully Real Madrid does not win the Club World Cup.
Yeah, we'll
All
see what
right.
happens there, man. We'll see. But I'm glad I can finally return the favor for you, man.
It's
Obviously
due.
you come on my podcast a lot of times, and it's never enough for me. But I'm glad that I can finally return the favor. It is interesting being on this side of the interview. Normally, I'm the one doing the interview, not the one having to answer questions. So it was really cool to do this.
But this is the first time, and it won't be the last. Make that straight. Yes, and so make sure you like, subscribe to Mo Football TV, and do all the fun stuff required. Because the next interview coming up very soon. So if you want to know who's coming up next, make sure you hit that notification bell, because I won't tell you until that day. So other than that, and those of you that like St. Louis CDSC talk, I will be jumping right next to Top Corner Talk about the St. Louis versus Portland disaster. So with that's it. Have a good evening.